Hi there, I'm Yvette Rajkopa, author, life coach, and wellness educator. Today I'm going to be talking about two very important topics, but before I do that, I'd like to thank Sasfin Bank for inviting me to have these wellness conversations with you. The first topic that I'll be talking about is dealing with different types of losses, where I'll go deeply into the different types of losses and how you can move through them. The other conversation that I'll be having with you is about creating a work-life balance, right? We're going through a pandemic. Some of us are working from home. Of course, this is a conversation that needs to be had. So I'm inviting you to just stay focused and stay present throughout this conversation. So dealing with different types of losses. So the first thing that I'm going to be talking about is the different type of losses that we experience. I've divided this into three different categories. The first type of loss is the loss of a loved one. This could be when a loved one passes on, or this could be through the end of a relationship. It could be a romantic relationship, a friendship, or a family member, not being in agreement with certain things and that relationship coming to an end as a result. So this is also a valid loss, because loss is really just us, the feeling that we experience when we've lost something that is valuable to us, a relationship that was valuable to us, or someone that was valuable to us. So that is when we experience a loss. The other type of loss that I'd like to speak about is the loss of a vision. So this is the second type of loss, right? And when do we experience the loss of a vision? It's when you don't achieve a certain goal by a certain age. Sometimes we're hard on ourselves, and that's a loss, right? We really wanted something to come to life. This is also something that could be accompanied with the first loss, So your loss could be that you expected or hoped to have somebody walk you down the aisle, but that didn't happen because maybe they passed on. So that's when you have to also mourn that loss, the loss of a vision, something that you wanted to see come to life, but this doesn't come to life as a result of circumstances like, for example, a pandemic happening, and that means that thing that you wanted hasn't been able to actualize, or you haven't been able to achieve it by a certain time. So you have to mourn that loss, right? And I'm also going to get to how you move past these losses as well at the end of the session. The third type of loss that one can experience is the loss of self. And I think that this is the most important type of loss, right? Because we go through so many different losses. And in those losses, we might feel like we're not ourselves. We might have attached ourselves to a certain type of role that we're performing, if you identified yourself as, in relationship to other people, if you felt like you've lost your support system, and also if you just don't feel like yourself, right? You don't know who you are, you're figuring that out. And a lot of us have experienced this. Going through a pandemic, you go through all types of losses. And one of that is a loss of self, because your coping mechanisms have changed. You're going through something for the first time in your life. So of course you don't know how to navigate through that, and you don't even know who you are through that process as well. So you have to kind of redefine yourself. So those are the three different types of losses that I'll be talking about specifically. And those are the three different types of losses that I think we mainly experience. Those are the three main types of losses that I'll be referring to when I speak of loss today. Loss is a universal experience that affects our body, our mind, and our emotions. And how so when I say that? I mean that, for example, in your body, you might feel a loss of energy if you're going through a loss. You might feel a loss of appetite. You might struggle to sleep at night, so sleepless nights or restless nights. And you might also find yourself struggling to concentrate. You might find yourself having negative thoughts. So this is the mind, right? Having frequent negative thoughts. You might find yourself having tense muscles. So some of you might find that you feel it in your neck, you feel it in your shoulders, you feel it in your back. So those are the main types of places in your body where you might feel it. You might also start to have migraines. So you might have a physical reaction to loss as well. So the reason I'm also bringing up these symptoms or these reactions to loss is because sometimes we are hard on ourselves because, we don't know that we're experiencing. So like, why am I having tense muscles? It's because you're going through a loss, and this is also normal when you're going through such a process. So another reaction, which is called the spiritual reaction. So when we go through loss, sometimes we might find ourselves questioning our beliefs, right? So the beliefs that we have, meaning that we might question our beliefs, or we might lean towards our spirituality. So sometimes it's either we have one of those polarities. So the reason, again, I'm mentioning this is because sometimes we feel guilty for having or going through that process, but it is also just a normal process and a normal part of loss. So now you're aware of the different types of symptoms that you might feel in your mind, body, and your emotions when you've experienced a loss, and these are completely normal. So these changes that you've been experiencing in your body, in your thought process, and all of that, is a normal part of loss, and that's why I've gone over that. So how do you begin to start processing a loss, or rather, what keeps us from processing a loss? The first one is emotions, right? Rejecting them or being hard on ourselves. So when we're experiencing a loss, there's certain emotions that come up, like shock, fear, anger, denial. So these show up in different processes of the loss. Feelings like sadness, feelings like fear, a strong sense of fear because, what's my life going to look like now that I don't have this person in my life? What's the future look like? So fear of, certain things happening. And sometimes even certain emotions from experiences of loss in the past. So if you've lost loved ones, but you never really processed it, that would show back up again. And then we have even double of those emotions, right? So when we don't allow ourselves to process those emotions, they don't disappear, right? They stay in our bodies, and sometimes that's why we start to feel aches and pains. Because what emotions are is that the word emotions comes from the word emoter, which means energy in motion, right? So when we don't allow ourselves to acknowledge an emotion and process it, right, it stays in our bodies. It doesn't just disappear. So what you need to do with the emotions that come up when you're experiencing a loss, when you're going through a process of loss, is that you need to identify the emotions and understand them. So a lot of us do this thing where you're like, I don't want to feel this, I don't want to feel this, I don't want to go through this. Or maybe you've designated yourself as the strong one, or maybe you're just trying to get through it, but how you get through it is by allowing yourself to feel exactly what you're feeling. So the first step in acknowledging your emotions is to name the emotion, right? I'm feeling sadness, right? Why am I feeling this emotion? Because I've lost somebody valuable to me. What am I giving myself to do about this emotion? I'm giving myself permission to feel the sadness, because it is a way of honoring it, and it is a way of releasing, so there is no shortcut in order to process emotions or anything of that sort, right? So again, I'm feeling fear. Why am I feeling fear? Because I'm scared of what the future would look like without this person. Maybe the person was a provider for you. Maybe the person was a strong support system for you, right? So understand the emotion that comes up. Do not reject your emotions, because what happens is that they just sit in your body and you'll feel them 5 years, 10 years later. Although the process of loss takes time, so processing an experience of loss may take time. There's no time frame that I can give to you and say within this time you'll be okay. However, not feeling your emotions, not acknowledging and processing them, that makes it even more difficult for us to process a loss. So whether you're feeling anger, seek to understand that emotion. Okay, why is this anger here? Maybe I still have some unresolved emotion towards this person. So sometimes you may experience a loss, but you still have unresolved anger towards that person. So what does this bring my awareness to? It's bringing my awareness to the fact that I was angry at this person. I feel angry at myself maybe because I didn't get the chance to say goodbye. I didn't see them, or I held a grudge against them before they passed on. So it's quite important to just seek to understand the emotions that you're feeling, and then ask yourself, what am I giving myself to do with this emotion? I'm giving myself permission to forgive myself. I'm giving myself permission to speak to somebody about this emotion. Then you can write or journal about the particular feelings that you're going through. So I always encourage journaling in order to process, because sometimes you can't go to therapy, right? Or you can't go and speak to a professional in that space. So the best thing that you can do is look at what it is that you have and use that to help you through your own process of loss. So emotions are quite important in processing loss. So I've spoken of the first reason why we struggle to process a loss, which was because we don't allow ourselves to acknowledge and process our emotions. The second reason is that we keep the emotions for too long. And what does this mean, right? So there's certain emotions. So like I said, every emotion has its purpose. So this doesn't take away from that, right? However, when we don't allow ourselves to process a certain type of emotion, so there are types of emotions that evolve and then they become regret, guilt, and sometimes anger and fear don't serve us, right? So, for example, if you are blaming yourself, sometimes a reaction to loss is that a person might feel guilty, even though it wasn't their fault, even though there's absolutely nothing that they could have done to stop that loss of that relationship or that loss of the loved one, right? They did their best in the moment, right? But we feel guilty, which keeps us from holding on to the loss. Letting go of the loss. So sometimes when we hold on to these emotions of regret, guilt, resentment towards ourselves or others, right, then we are unable to process the loss. So if this is a loss of a loved one who's passed on, if you have anger towards yourself because there's something that you're blaming yourself for, you need to understand that you did the best that you could at the time, right? And there's nothing else that you could have done differently because you did not know, that things would come out in that way. So you did the best that you could at the time, and you need to release that and find a way to forgive yourself for whatever you've been blaming yourself for, and find a way to maybe forgive that the person is there's something else that maybe you had, a disagreement before the passing of that loved one. So it's quite important that we identify that. Do we have guilt towards ourselves? Do we have anger? Do we have resentment? Do we have regrets? I wish I'd called them one more time. I wish I went and spoke to them. So you can't process a loss, when you're blaming yourself or just allowing yourself to sit in these emotions of guilt and regret. So it's quite important to just identify which emotions are not serving you, which thoughts are not serving you right now, and in your grieving process. So look back and say, really, you did the best you could. So whether this is, for example, if you had a goal of the loss of a vision, right, the other loss that I spoke about, and you had a goal that you wanted to achieve by a certain age, there's something that you wanted to do that didn't really work out in the way that you wanted. Learn from the experience so that you can release the loss. Learn from the experience as well so that you can let go of that thought that, I could have done this better, I could have done this. So guilt and regret never serve us in anything. The best thing we can do is learn from the experience and let it go, or forgive ourselves or forgive anybody else involved in that process of guilt and resentment. So I hope you're still with me as I discuss these things that keep you from processing a loss. The third reason why you may struggle to process a loss is the limiting decisions that you've made to yourself. So limiting decisions are decisions that we've made after we experienced a loss or any other event that we're struggling to process, and then we unconsciously make these decisions to ourselves which keep us from moving forward. A limiting decision often starts with the words, I will never be complete again. I'll never be able to bounce back from this. I'll never be the same again, right? I'll never be able to love again. I'll never, right? So these decisions, because we're feeling obviously overwhelmed as we go through this process of loss of a loved one, loss of a vision, and when we obviously feel disappointment and all these other emotions, and then we make these decisions to ourselves. Sometimes we think we're honoring the person, right, that we have lost, or honoring that process, but really we're keeping ourselves stuck. So how you identify a limiting decision is that decision that you've made to yourself serving you. For example, if you would still like to, you need to continue living, right, for your children, for those around you, right, you still need to go on with life. And sometimes these limiting decisions keep us stuck. So you might not be able, to move forward in your journey because you've made this unconscious limiting decision to yourself. I'll never be complete again. How are you going to feel complete? Or here's another one that people never really acknowledge or even notice that they've made this decision to themselves, right? And I want you to also think about some of the limiting decisions that you may have made to yourself as a result of a loss, right? So I will never be happy again. It's not okay for me to be happy. It's not okay for me to move forward. So what happens is, because you've unconsciously made that decision to not be happy, to not be okay, to not move forward, right? Every single time you want to move forward, every single time you're about to make progress, you feel like you're betraying yourself because you've made this decision unconsciously. So the limiting decisions that we made, we can't bypass, right? Because in our belief system, it's there, it's ingrained. So you need to identify it and ask yourself, what new decision am I making, from this experience, right? What am I choosing to learn from this experience? And what can I believe or make a decision to do that will allow me to move through this experience? So it's quite important to identify these limiting decisions that you've made and to just make a new decision, right? It is okay for you to start being happy again. It is okay for you to move forward. You might be able to find happiness again, It is okay for you to start creating a new life and new memories, right? So really identify the limiting decisions that you have made to yourself and start to think of ways in which or start to give yourself a new decision, start to give yourself a new belief so that you can live according to that. So the decisions, right, or the things that we believe after we've gone through a loss or a traumatic experience or just a painful experience, they really affect how we move forward with life, because those decisions determine the thoughts that we have. So if you've made a decision like, it's not okay for me to be happy, it's not okay for me to move on, all your thoughts, all your decisions, every single move you make, all your actions will be determined by that limiting decision. So they really affect us more than what we think they do. So the fourth thing that I want to talk about, which is also a reaction to loss or something that keeps us from processing a loss, is the questions that we ask ourselves, right? So a lot of us, after we've experienced the loss, you may find yourself asking a question like, why me? Why did this have to happen to me? Why now? How am I supposed to move through this? All of that. So the thing about some of these questions is that we may not find the answers, which makes us feel stuck, right? So whether this is a loss of a loved one, a loss of a vision, or even a loss of self, right? So now you need to ask yourself new questions if you want to feel differently, because there's certain questions that you can ask yourself which will empower you and allow you to move through this process, right, with ease, or at least in a better way. So the questions that we ask ourselves sometimes don't serve us, so you want to ask questions that will really empower us. And because it is quite normal to ask questions after you have experienced a loss, it's quite normal. So the thing is that, are those questions serving you, right? So you need to ask questions that will actually help you through this process. Some of these questions sound like this, right? What can I be grateful for from this experience? So if you've lost a loved one, is there anything that you can be grateful for from this experience, right? Is there anything like memories? Is there an experience that you can be grateful for from that experience, right? What can I learn from this experience which will allow me to heal? Is there anything that you can learn from this which will allow you to heal? What can I start to believe from this experience which will allow me to move forward in my journey? What can I learn from this experience which will allow me to let go? What can I start to believe that will allow me to let go? What can I say to myself that will allow me to move through this process with ease, right? So this could be like a mantra or something that you can say to yourself that will allow you to process this. So this is how your mind is programmed, right? Any question that you ask yourself, your unconscious mind starts to give you answers to, right? So you're actually programmed to give yourself answers, right? And that's how the mind works. And that's why, when you go through a therapy session, or when anybody asks you a question, your brain starts to look, for an answer. So for example, now if I say, when was the last time you saw the color pink? Your brain automatically starts to look for that color pink and think about, when was the last time I saw that color? That's just how your mind works. So if you ask yourself different types of questions, you're going to get different types of answers, and you're also going to feel differently because the questions that you're asking are actually quite empowering. So here are the questions that you can also ask, and I encourage you to write these down. What thoughts can I keep that will allow me to move through this process? What thoughts can I keep that will support me through this journey? Is there any other way that I can honor this process? Or this could be honoring the loved one. Is there a way that I can honor the loved one? So usually when I have a session with someone that I'm working with in a private session, I'd ask them, what would this person say to you right now at this point in your life? What is it that you think they would say to you? And usually they do get the answers to that. So if an answer comes through for that, then I encourage you to write that down. What do you think this person would say to you? And hold on to that message, that encouraging message that person would say to you. And here's also an important one, right? The meaning we get from experience is what allows us to move forward. So these questions allow you to find meaning through the experience. So what meaning can you find from this experience? What meaning can you make out of this experience? So whatever that meaning is to you, right? So these are some of the questions that can really allow you to move through any kind of loss, any kind of experience that you've had that you're really struggling to process. So what can I learn from this experience that allow me to do better? So that applies to like a vision, and sometimes even if it's an experience of a loss of a relationship, right? What can I learn from this experience that allow me to move forward? What was the highest purpose of this experience, if any? Some of these questions may not resonate with you, but I'd say pick the ones that do and really ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? What was the highest purpose of this experience? What can I be grateful for from this experience that will allow me to move forward? And what can I say to myself that will allow me to move forward with ease, right? So those are some of the questions that you can ask yourself. The last thing that I want to talk about that keeps us from processing a loss is the memories that we focus on. Sometimes when we've experienced a loss, we focus on the most negative memories or the recent memories from that experience, right? So sometimes we need to focus on new memories, right? So here are the questions that you can ask yourself, right? Are there any new memories that I can focus on? Are there new memories that I can create? Because the truth is, you do have loved ones that are still here. You do have people in your life that still care about you. And you do have an opportunity to create a new idea, a new vision for yourself. So with every single loss that we experience, right? So behind every loss that we experience, right, there's a new opportunity to create. So you may want to think about some of the opportunities that you have to create in your life. This could be new memories with loved ones that you have, new memories, new ways of commemorating, new ways of creating that you can focus on, rather than the things that, so even if it's a loss of self, and I think this is also quite important, if it's a loss of self that you're experiencing and that's what you're feeling right now, right? What new version of yourself can you create? What new, because you have an opportunity to create yourself over again, right? So this also brings me to a question that you can ask yourself, is that what character trait rather can emerge for me through this experience, right? What character trait is this demanding of me to emerge through this experience, right? And what new memories can I create, right? Who can you create those new memories with? It might be trying new things for the first time. It might be creating new memories with loved one that you still have around. So really think about the different types of memories that you can create, and be grateful for the memories that you do have in the past, right? So focus on these things, focus on the things that you create, and focus on where you are now and what it is that you can do right now, right? I do encourage you to speak to somebody if you are struggling with a loss and feel like you're not coping. It is okay to ask for help, right? And really just be kind to yourself through the losses. Loss is an ongoing process. Healing is not linear, right? It is different, it's multidimensional, right? It goes like this, right? So it really is quite important that if you find yourself in a space where you're struggling, speak to somebody about that particular thing that you're going through. You know, speak to loved ones, speak to those that you went through the same experience with you, or speak to family members that may be able to relate to the loss that you have, right? It's never going to be exactly the same, right? But when we speak about it and surround ourselves with love and support, right, as we go through this, it really helps our journey, right? And make the journey yours. There's no wrong or right way to grieve, right? But there are things that we can do that may not be serving us, and if you're identifying these things that are not serving us, coping mechanisms that are not serving you, I really do encourage you to speak to somebody that can help you through this process of loss and grief, right? And yeah, don't be hard on yourself, right? It's a process. Hi, so in the first part of this video, or the other portion of this video, I spoke about the different types of losses and how we can move through them, right? Because you want to always move through things and not get over them, right? So that you can go through every single step and process that needs to happen for you to get to the other side. The other thing that I'll be talking about today is creating a work-life balance, right? We've all had our reality shaken. We're in a pandemic right now, and we're struggling. You know, some of us are working from home, and your workspace is now also your living room, or your workspace, and now you have the kids around, and you have your partner around, or you just, things have really shifted for you, and you're struggling to find that balance again, or create that balance rather. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. So the first thing that will help you in order to create a work-life balance is to create a routine. So I'm going to mention the different areas in which you need to create your routine, and just make sure that you note them, because this is going to be important moving forward in this conversation. So you need a routine for your work, right? What does your work day look like? Do you just get up in your pajamas and you sit down, and then next thing you're checking emails, next thing you're trying to make breakfast, next thing you're doing this? So you need some sort of routine and structure so that you can feel like you go to work. And here's an interesting fact, right? You need to be able to transition to work, because sometimes we feel really overwhelmed and overloaded because we don't have a morning, or home to work transition and work to home transition. So what most people do not know is that drive from home to work or work to home allowed your brain to have a transition so that it can just adapt to where you're going to be in, right? So now when you work from the same space the entire day, right, and don't have a routine, you're depriving yourself of that routine, which makes you feel very overwhelmed. So everything feels very monotonous, like there isn't, actually an actual transition. So that transition from work to home is quite important, and that's why you need to have a routine. So you need to still get up, you need to still, take that shower, get into your work clothes and prepare, because that process, even though it's a very small process, right, or seems very small, allows you to adapt to the thing that you need to do or the workspace that you're going into. So make sure that you have something that allows you to transition in the morning or whenever you start your work schedule, right? And when you knock off, also have something that allows you to transition into the workspace. So this could be something like going for a run, this could be something like just waking up and writing or meditating, or something that really allows you to have that transitional period between you and getting to work and leaving work. So for your work day, have some sort of routine in place for your work day. Means you have office hours that you actually operate in. Otherwise, you'll find yourself working till midnight, right? And everything feels like it's just ongoing and there's no stop to it. So your work routine means you have to look at, okay, what does your day schedule look like? Do you take a break during your work hours, or do you just work throughout? Do you still take your lunch break? And what do you do during that lunch break? It's quite important that you also still meet up virtually with colleagues and so forth, and have those lunch breaks or tea break meetings and so forth, because those things help you to have that balance throughout your work day. The next part of your routine that you need to have is health and fitness, right? Still exercise, go do meditation, whatever it is that contributes to your health. Try to eat right, do all those things that will contribute to your overall wellness, right? So really find a routine that works for you, so that means over the weekend, do you do something? Do you go out and go hiking if you feel it's safe to do so for you, because we are in a pandemic, so obviously you have to do something that works for you. Go for a run, do all those things that still work for you. So it's quite important that you still do those things that really allow you to have that, balance in terms of your health and your fitness. So find something that you actually enjoy, because here's the other thing, right? When we think of health and fitness, we go to the thing that everybody else is doing, but what do you actually enjoy doing? So if that's dancing, go dancing. If that's have a dance session at home. If that's exercising and running, or going to the gym, or just going for a hike, or going for a walk, going to do something, or meditation or yoga, anything that really creates, that health and fitness for you. So find that one thing for yourself and have a routine for that. How many hours are you going to exercise on which days of the week, because that allows us to create that balance. Family, have routines for family, right? So now your family's in your space all day, and I'm going to also tap into how do you now create that balance, right? Because sometimes you're working in the same space throughout the day. So it's quite important that you have family routines, right? Do you sit down and have dinner together? Do you catch up with people have Zoom live? So have a routine for your family. Do you meet up virtually once a month, or do you meet up physically once a month? Whatever it is that works for you and you feel is safe to do so right now. Your relationships, have routines for your relationships as well, and have routines for your spirituality, the things that make you feel grounded, right? Whatever that looks like. So identify the different areas that make your life, right? So, and create routines for all those different areas. And that's how we create that balance, that on this day I meditate, on this day, I exercise at this time, and be really, really specific, So I always say put dates, put times, because that's when, we really hold ourselves accountable to the things that we said we'll do, right? So now that you have your routines, right? And this is so important, because a lot of people go and write down routines. I'll go exercising on this day, I'll do this. The most important thing is that you start to set boundaries, right? Boundaries means saying, communicating to other people and to yourself that, this is the boundary that I'm setting for myself. At this time, I knock off, right? Because having a routine, we can all write down a schedule, but how do we keep ourselves accountable to that schedule, and how do we make sure that we honor ourselves, in whatever it is that we've committed ourselves to? When it's time to go to work, then you go to work. When it's time to knock off, you go to knock off. And you have to set a boundary and say, I'm not going to check my phone during family time. I'm not going to check my emails during family time, right? So when you notice that, right, once you start using these techniques, is that once you start to have these boundaries and start to honor them and start to honor your schedule and all of that, you'll start to notice that you actually work much better, right? So you're more energized to work, and you don't feel overwhelmed because everything is just one big jumble, right? Everything is just jumbled up together, and you're just trying to juggle it, right? And that's something that I'm going to speak about later in this video, that there's an integrator and there's a segmenter. And a segmenter is somebody that really separates their time so that they can create that balance in their lives, right? So without boundaries, there's no way we can create we can create balance. So boundaries start with yourself and say, okay, how am I going to honor these commitments? What are my commitments, right? And sticking to those things, and then communicating them to others and saying, at this time, this is my work time, right? So communicate to your colleagues and the people that you work with. I start work at this time. If you do have a set time, of course, then also communicate. If you have a set time, right, where you take emails or urgent emails and everything like that, also communicate that to the people that you work with. You have a set time where you'll be then receiving calls and doing virtual meetings and all of that. Communicate that to the people that we work with. So it's quite important that we communicate the boundaries, because here's the thing, we get so angry because we haven't communicated those boundaries to the people that we work with, and we're wondering why everybody keeps disrespecting those times and all of that. So whether it's okay. So the other thing that will allow you to create a work-life balance is to prioritize differently, right? So of course, when we don't have, a certain clear schedule and everything seems urgent, right? When we are overwhelmed, we feel stressed, we're frustrated, nothing seems to be falling into place, and everything is a rush, right? We're in survival mode. So to step out of survival mode, we really just need to create a structure for ourselves and identify what is actually urgent and important, right? What is actually urgent and important? So these are the things that you need to ask yourself. What is urgent and important? What is important but not urgent? What is urgent but not important? And prioritize your work there according to what is urgent and important, right? So once you get the urgent things out of the way, the urgent and important things out of the way, right, then you can move to the other things which are not as urgent and not as important, but important or important but urgent. So just make a list of those things. What's actually urgent right now? What do I need to delegate? What do I need to, bring on somebody else? What's a team effort, So identify those things, and also just identify what is urgent and prioritize according to that, right? So you can use that for different areas in your life. And I know when you're frustrated, everything seems urgent and everything seems important. So do prioritize to what is urgent and important. Make sure you have a list and you actually write down the things that are urgent and important. And once you notice that, you'll see that, okay, you can segment all your work and all of that, and it makes it easier for you to manage your schedule according to what is urgent, so that you're not running around trying to figure things out, and you can say, okay, this is what's important right now. I'm going to focus on this, and then move to the next thing that's also important. Okay, so now that you are prioritizing according to what is urgent and important, and you have your list down and all of that, make sure that you manage your time long term. So that means plan months ahead, so that you're not overwhelmed, or you don't plan too many things close to each other, which will allow you to have some time to rest in between, and also to travel and do everything else that allows you to keep that balance. Remember that balance is something that you have to be intentional about, right? We don't just land and find ourselves in balance, right? It's something that we create, by consistently being intentional and observing what's not working and doing what actually is working, right? What's not working in your environment right now. So you can identify those things and see, okay, these things are not working. Let me try something else. So balance is created by being intentional consistently. So look up for apps like Calendly that can actually help you in order to manage your time and your plans long term, right? And just put those things down. They're apps that you can find online if you just search, and you can use those things to help you manage your time better. The last thing that I want to say is that it doesn't matter, how many hands you have and how capable you think you are. If you're actually doing a lot, right, there's no way that you're going to be able to find balance, right? If you're doing too much right now, right, if you've taken too much right on your laps right now, there's sometimes it gets to an extent where there is no way you can find balance, because you're actually just doing a lot. So when you find yourself feeling overwhelmed, notice these things, right? Is there anything that you can delegate right now? Is there any way you can ask for support? So look at your home environment, right? Is there a way that you can ask for support from your family, your friends, your partner, whoever it is that can assist you in that environment? Look at your work environment. Is there any way that you can ask for support, in that environment, right? Sometimes, even when I work with executives and so forth, they might not actually use the resources that they have at their hand. They might be taking on admin work that's not theirs to do. They might be doing taking on certain responsibilities that are actually not yours, which makes you feel very overwhelmed. So look at certain things and say, is there anything that I can delegate, right? And the things that I'm doing right now, is anything that I can delegate? Again, you can delegate it to whoever. So look at the different environments you work on, your home environment, and look at what can you actually delegate. Don't be afraid to ask for help, right? The people that are there in your life are there to assist you in your journey. So it's okay to ask for help if you feel overwhelmed. You don't have to do everything. And I'm speaking directly to those who position themselves as, I'm the strong one, I'm the one that can do everything, right? Sometimes it's really not your job, and it's not only your responsibility to do those things. So be sure to communicate in the spaces that you occupy, and speak to those that you need to speak to, and ask for help, and get the assistance that you need, so that you can have a better outfit. You cannot be overwhelmed and then create resentment against people when you actually haven't even asked them for help, right? All right, so here's the other thing. There is no failure. There's only feedback, and this is my last point, right? If you notice that something is not working in your environment, that's feedback to say, try something else. Use the resources that you have to create more, or to create solutions. Use the people around you to create solutions in a way that will serve you, and the outcomes that you want to see coming to life, right? So in the workspace as well, there are people that you might need, don't overwhelm yourself with certain things. Sometimes it's okay to bring something up in a group environment and ask, hey, what do you think could be some solutions, so that we can all manage our time better as a team? We can all submit our reports together as a team, and so forth, right? At home, ask, well, make it a group activity. I've noticed that we're struggling with boundaries, everybody's overwhelmed, we're all frustrated. How do you think we can balance these things and find a better way to work and share the same space, right? So those are my tips and things that can help you create more balance. But really, it's about being intentional, right? And noticing what is not working and what's not serving you, and try something else. It takes a lot of intentionality, and it takes time sometimes, but I can assure you that from the people that I've worked with, right, one-on-one as well, and just changing maybe how we look at certain things, like just everything is urgent, maybe what is actually urgent, and writing things down and putting things down in paper, putting dates down on paper, and looking for solutions from ourselves, from online, and from the people around us can be really helpful, right? So that's it from me, Yvette Rachikopa, author, life coach, and wellness educator. Thank you for watching this. I really hope it was helpful. Please feel free to contact me and find me on any platforms, and ask any questions that you might have with regards. And I'm wishing you the best in your journey as you try to find balance, and as you manage all these emotions as you go through the process of loss. So I hope that you continue to trust the process, and wishing you all moving forward in your journey.